I'm Charlton, 27, the invisible middle child in my family's grand Boston estate. That Christmas morning still haunts me, Mom beaming as she handed my sister Rebecca a small box with a house key inside. "We bought her a house. You'll understand someday," she said, not even glancing my way. Years of favoritism crystallized in that moment. I stayed silent, clutching my gift for Dad, a single piece of paper that would shatter our family's perfect facade. Before I tell you what happened next, where are you watching from? Hit that like and subscribe button, because what my father saw on that paper changed our family forever. Growing up as the middle child in the prestigious Matthews family wasn't easy. I'm Charlton Matthews, a successful architect who designed 3 award-winning buildings in downtown Boston, yet somehow remained invisible within my own family. My younger sister Rebecca, 25, had always been the golden child, beautiful, charming, and the recipient of every advantage our parents could provide. My older brother Marcus, 32, escaped the dynamics early by becoming a successful investment banker in New York, visiting only on holidays with his picture-perfect wife and twin daughters. Our father, Howard Matthews, built his fortune in real estate development. A stern, imposing man with salt and pepper hair and piercing blue eyes that could freeze you with disappointment. He expected excellence, but somehow only recognized it in Rebecca. My mother, Eleanor, a former debutante turned philanthropist, orchestrated our family's social standing with meticulous precision. Her calendar filled with charity galas and committee meetings, yet she never missed any of Rebecca's events. Mine. Well, that was another story. The favoritism started subtly. When we were kids, Rebecca's dance recitals were family affairs, requiring attendance from extended family, while my architectural competition wins earned brief nods at dinner. When I graduated high school as valedictorian, my parents missed the ceremony for Rebecca's chorus performance. She got a brand new car for her 16th birthday. I received driving lessons and access to the family's oldest vehicle. When college acceptances arrived, my parents threw a lavish party celebrating Rebecca's admission to Dartmouth. My MIT acceptance, despite being ranked the top architecture program in the country, warranted a simple, "good job, son," and a firm handshake. I'd worked tirelessly through school, graduating top of my class from MIT, securing a position at a prestigious architecture firm, and eventually leading design teams on projects that transformed Boston's skyline. My Brunswick Tower design won the American Architectural Award last year. The ceremony was attended by my girlfriend Jessica and colleagues not my family. They were at Rebecca's art show opening that weekend. It wasn't that my sister was talentless. She was a decent painter who worked at a small gallery, but her mediocre achievements were celebrated while my significant accomplishments went unacknowledged. Last month, while helping my parents organize their home office during Thanksgiving weekend, I discovered something that finally explained everything. Hidden in a folder labeled Family Investments were documents detailing our family trust funds. Each of us children had been allocated equal portions when we were born, substantial amounts that would help us establish ourselves. Yet, as I flipped through the statements, a disturbing pattern emerged. Year after year, money from my trust had been diverted to Rebecca's small amounts at first, then larger sums, as we entered adulthood. My fund was nearly depleted while hers had more than tripled. Our family home sat in Boston's Beacon Hill neighborhood, a 5-story brownstone worth millions filled with antiques and artwork collected over generations. Christmas at the Matthews residence was always an elaborate affair. A 20-foot Douglas fir in the main hall garlands, winding up the grand staircase, and Eleanor's collection of porcelain angels displayed on every available surface. The dining room table would be set with the family china, dating back to the 19th century, and Howard would carve the prime rib while wearing the ridiculous Santa hat. My mother insisted upon the only time all year his serious demeanor cracked. The contrast between my life and Rebecca's couldn't be more stark. While she lived in a waterfront condo in Back Bay, purchased by our parents as a graduation gift, I rented a modest apartment in Somerville that I paid for entirely on my own. When I needed student loans for graduate school, my father explained that I needed to learn financial responsibility. Meanwhile, Rebecca received a monthly allowance that exceeded my mortgage payment despite her part-time work schedule at the gallery. Jessica, my girlfriend of 3 years, had been the first to point out the disparity. "It's not normal, Charlton," she'd said, after yet another family dinner, where my parents fawned over Rebecca's minor gallery success while ignoring my promotion to senior architect. Jessica, a clinical psychologist, recognized the unhealthy family dynamic immediately. She'd been encouraging me to establish boundaries to confront my parents about their treatment. "You deserve better," she insisted, "and they need to recognize what they're doing." After finding those financial documents, I finally agreed with her. I spent weeks gathering evidence, making copies, creating spreadsheets, tracking every diverted dollar. I consulted discreetly with a financial advisor friend who confirmed what I suspected. What my parents had done wasn't just unfair, it was potentially illegal. The trusts had been established with specific terms, and they had violated those terms repeatedly to favor Rebecca. As Christmas approached, I made my decision. I would confront them, but not with angry accusations or emotional outbursts. I would present them with irrefutable evidence of their favoritism in black and white dollars and cents. I would force them to face what they had done not just emotionally, but financially. The holidays seemed fitting a time when family truth should matter most. What I didn't anticipate was how dramatically the revelation would alter our family forever, or that it would begin with a house key on Christmas morning. Christmas morning dawned bright and cold sunlight glinting off fresh snow that blanketed our family's Beacon Hill neighborhood. I arrived at my parents' home at 9:30, helping myself to the spare key hidden in the garden statue. No one had offered me a permanent key after I moved out. The house smelled of cinnamon and pine, Eleanor's signature Christmas scent achieved through strategically placed candles and potpourri. In the kitchen, our longtime housekeeper, Maria, was arranging pastries on a silver tray. "Merry Christmas, Mr. Charlton," she said warmly. Maria had always treated all three of us children equally, perhaps the only adult in my life who had. "Your parents and Miss Rebecca are in the sitting room. Mr. Marcus called to say they're running a few minutes late." I nodded, my heart pounding as I felt the weight of the envelope in my inner jacket pocket. The documents inside represented not just financial betrayal, but years of emotional neglect. I'd rehearsed this moment for weeks, practiced maintaining my composure when the inevitable denials and justifications began. Jessica had coached me through potential reactions, helped me prepare responses that wouldn't devolve into childish accusations. "You look pale, mijo," Maria said, studying my face. "Everything okay?" "Just tired," I lied. "Big project at work." I grabbed a croissant from the tray, though my stomach was too knotted to eat. "I'll head in to say hello." The sitting room was Christmas incarnate, a 12-foot tree adorned with the Matthews family ornaments collected over generations. Stockings hung precisely on the marble fireplace and presents stacked in organized piles. My mother had color-coded the wrapping years ago: red for Rebecca, blue for Marcus, green for me. The disparity was immediately obvious. Rebecca's red-wrapped gifts formed a small mountain while my green packages could fit in a shopping bag. Charlton. My mother air-kissed both my cheeks, careful not to smudge her perfectly applied makeup. Eleanor Matthews, at 58, looked 45, her blonde hair professionally colored, and styled, her figure maintained through rigorous tennis and Pilates schedules. "Darling, Merry Christmas. Don't you look handsome?" My father looked up from his Wall Street Journal, offering a brief nod. "Son, Howard Matthews, didn't do emotional greetings." At 62, he remained imposing 6'3", with broad shoulders and a perpetual expression of mild disappointment. "Drive okay in the snow?" Rebecca bounded over, genuinely happy to see me. That was the complicated part. My sister wasn't malicious. She seemed genuinely unaware of the preferential treatment, had never asked for it, and always showed me authentic affection. Charlie. She hugged me tightly, her designer perfume enveloping me. "I missed you. You've been working too hard again, I can tell." "The Brunswick Tower doesn't design itself," I said, returning her hug despite myself. Rebecca was stunning, as always, her honey blonde hair falling in perfect waves, dressed in what was undoubtedly an expensive new Christmas outfit, cashmere sweater, and tailored pants in festive red. The doorbell announced Marcus's arrival, bringing welcome distraction. My older brother entered with his wife Samantha and their 7-year-old twin daughters, Emma and Lily. The girls' excitement immediately transformed the formal atmosphere as they ran to the tree, pointing at ornaments and shaking packages. "Uncle Charlie," they squealed in unison, tackling me with hugs. Did you bring us something awesome? Last year's building blocks were the best. I designed special architectural blocks for them, miniature versions of famous buildings they could assemble. You'll have to wait and see. I winked, grateful for their uncomplicated affection. Marcus gave me a knowing look as we shook hands. Though we weren't especially close, he'd experienced enough of our parents' dynamics before escaping to recognize the patterns. Hanging in there, he murmured too quietly, for others to hear. For now, I replied. Soon we gathered for the gift opening ceremony, a meticulously orchestrated event in the Matthews household. Howard played Santa, distributing gifts one at a time, so each could be properly admired and appreciated. The twins received their presents, first practical items from my parents, like winter coats and educational toys. Next came adults' gifts. Marcus and Samantha received crystal wine glasses and a weekend getaway to Vermont. I opened a generic sweater from my parents, trying not to notice it still had the clearance tag partially attached. Rebecca predictably received diamond earrings that made Samantha gasp, a designer handbag, and a first-edition book by her favorite author. We have one special gift left, my mother announced, with barely contained excitement. Howard handed Rebecca a small box with elaborate gold wrapping. This is something we've been planning for quite some time. Rebecca opened it slowly, her eyes widening as she lifted out a key, attached to a diamond-studded keychain. What's this? She asked, genuinely confused. My mother's eyes glistened with tears of joy. It's the key to your new house, darling, in Cambridge, just 3 blocks from your gallery. That Victorian you've always admired, we bought it for you. The room fell silent, except for Rebecca's gasp. Even Marcus looked stunned. A house, Rebecca whispered. You bought me a house. Howard nodded proudly. 4 bedrooms, 3 baths, completely renovated, but with all the original charm. It's our investment in your future. But that's too much, Rebecca said, though her voice trembled with excitement. That house must cost. Don't worry about the cost, my mother waved dismissively. You're worth every penny. I sat frozen, clutching my coffee cup so tightly I feared it might shatter. The Victorian in question was worth at least $2 million. I'd admired it myself during architectural walks through Cambridge. Charlton won't understand now, my mother added, not even looking my way. But someday he'll see why we did this. The room grew uncomfortable. Marcus shot me a concerned glance. Rebecca, to her credit, seemed embarrassed by the extravagance. I have one more gift, I said quietly, my voice steady despite the emotional turmoil. I reached into my jacket and removed the envelope. For you, Dad. It's not as elaborate as a house, but I think you'll find it illuminating. Everyone watched as I handed the plain white envelope to my father. He accepted it with a puzzled expression, clearly expecting some architectural drawing or perhaps concert tickets. What's this? Some kind of gift certificate, he asked, beginning to open it. Something like that, I replied. You could call it a receipt for years of investments. Howard's fingers moved deftly to open the envelope, the practiced motion of a man who'd opened countless business documents throughout his career. His expression was one of mild curiosity, perhaps expecting theater tickets or a gift card to his favorite steakhouse. The room maintained the cheerful Christmas atmosphere, the twins playing with their new toys by the tree, Rebecca still admiring her house key, my mother straightening a crooked ornament. That atmosphere shattered the moment Howard withdrew the papers from the envelope. I'd organized everything meticulously. First, a summary sheet showing the original trust allocations, 3 equal amounts for 3 children. Next, color-coded spreadsheets tracking every withdrawal from my account over 12 years with corresponding deposits into Rebecca's last copies of the original trust documents, highlighting the violated terms. My father's face transformed as he read the change so dramatic that Marcus stopped mid-conversation with Samantha. First came confusion, Howard's brow furrowing as he tried to understand what he was looking at. Then recognition dawned, his eyes widening slightly. Finally, the color drained from his face, leaving him ashen as he reached the final calculations. Howard, what is it? My mother approached, concerned by his sudden pallor. He didn't answer, continuing to flip through the pages with increasingly unsteady hands. Dad, Rebecca set down her key, sensing the shift in energy. When Howard finally looked up, his eyes locked with mine. For the first time in my adult life, I saw something I'd never witnessed before. My father looked afraid. Where did you get these? His voice was barely audible. "From your home office," I replied calmly. "Last month, while helping Mom organize, I wasn't snooping. The folder was right there in the cabinet." "What is it?" My mother tried to look over Howard's shoulder, but he shifted the papers away. "Charlton," he began, then stopped, seemingly at a loss for words. $2,342,517, I said, my voice steady. "That's the exact amount transferred from my trust fund to Rebecca's over the past 12 years. Plus the estimated investment returns, I would have earned another $800,000 approximately." The room went completely still. Even the twins sensed the tension, abandoning their toys to huddle against their mother. "What?" Rebecca stood, her face contorted in confusion. "What are you talking about?" Marcus moved next, crossing the room to take the papers from our father's limp hands. His experience in finance allowed him to grasp the situation quickly. "Jesus Christ," he muttered, scanning the documents. "Mom, Dad, is this accurate?" My mother snatched a page from Marcus, her eyes darting across the numbers. "This is ridiculous. Howard, tell him. This is nonsense." But my father couldn't meet anyone's eyes. His silence was confirmation enough. "You established 3 equal trusts when we were born," I explained for everyone's benefit. "Marcus's remained untouched, probably because you knew he'd noticed the withdrawals. Mine was systematically drained to supplement Rebecca's 2elf. That's how you afforded the Back Bay condo, the luxury car, the year abroad, and now apparently a Cambridge Victorian." Rebecca had gone pale, her hand covering her mouth. "I didn't know," she whispered. "Charlie, I swear I didn't know." "I believe you," I said, "and I meant it. My sister wasn't the villain here. This is absurd." My mother finally found her voice. "We've always treated you children equally. Charlton, you're twisting things." "The numbers don't lie, Mom," I interrupted. "December 2012, $50,000, withdrawn from my account, coinciding exactly with Rebecca's study abroad semester in Paris. March 2015, $300,000, transferred the same day you made the down payment on her condo. August 2018, another $200,000 when she wanted to open that pop-up gallery that failed after 3 months." Marcus whistled low. "Meanwhile, you told Charlton he needed to learn fiscal responsibility when he asked for help with graduate school tuition. That's why he's still paying off student loans." "We had our reasons," Howard finally spoke, his voice hoarse. "And the new house?" I asked. "Let me guess, the remaining balance of my trust, plus a home equity loan." Howard's flinch confirmed my suspicion. Rebecca stood abruptly, tears streaming down her face. "I don't want it. I don't want the house. Not like this." She placed the key on the coffee table with trembling hands. "Becca, no." My mother reached for her. "This isn't what it looks like. Your brother is being dramatic." "Am I, Mom?" I pulled out another document. "This is the original trust agreement. Section 7.3 specifically prohibits transferring assets between beneficiaries without explicit written consent. Did I ever sign anything authorizing these transfers?" My father's silence was damning. "That's what I thought," I continued. "What you've done isn't just unfair, it's potentially illegal. My trust was established in my name with you, as trustees obligated to act in my best interest. We were acting in the family's best interest." Howard finally set his voice, finding strength in defensiveness. "By stealing from one child to give to another?" Marcus asked incredulously. "We didn't steal," my mother snapped. "Everything stayed in the family." "Except it didn't stay with the family member it was designated for," I pointed out. "And while Rebecca got a condo, a car, and now a house, I took out loans for graduate school and live in a 1-bedroom apartment I can barely afford in Somerville." Samantha, who had been silent, suddenly spoke up. "Emma, Lily, why don't you take your new toys upstairs to the guest room?" The twins, sensing the adult tension, didn't argue. Once they were safely upstairs, Samantha turned to my parents. "I've watched this dynamic for years, but had no idea it went this far. This is unconscionable." "You don't understand," my mother insisted. "Rebecca has special needs." "Special needs," I repeated incredulously. "She's a fully capable adult with a part-time job at a gallery." "She's sensitive," my mother protested. "She needs security, stability." You've always been stronger, more independent. So I was punished for being capable, I asked. For working hard and not asking for handouts. We never meant to hurt you, my father said quietly. We always intended to make it right eventually. How exactly, I challenged. The trust is nearly empty now. Were you planning to sell the house you just gave her? Or were you planning to drain Marcus's next? My brother's head snapped up at that suggestion. Of course not, Howard said quickly. Marcus's funds are untouchable. But mine weren't. The pain in my voice was evident, despite my attempts to remain composed. Rebecca approached me, tears streaming down her face. Charlie, I had no idea. Please believe me. I'll sign the house over to you. I'll pay you back somehow. This isn't about the house, Becca, I said gently. It's about what it represents, years of our parents deciding you deserved more than me. That's not true, my mother protested. But her voice lacked conviction. $2.3 million says otherwise. Marcus interjected, still reviewing the documents. And that's just what we can trace directly. The Christmas morning had disintegrated entirely. Maria peeked in once, assessed the situation, and quietly retreated. Presents lay forgotten under the tree. The perfect Matthews family Christmas was exposed for what it truly was, a carefully constructed facade, covering years of favoritism and financial manipulation. I trusted you, I said finally, looking directly at my parents. Not just with my money, but with my accomplishments, my needs, my place in this family. You betrayed that trust on every level. For once, neither of my parents had a ready response. The evidence was too overwhelming, the betrayal too obvious to rationalize away. What do you want? Howard finally asked, his voice heavy with defeat. I want what was rightfully mine, I answered. And I want you both to finally acknowledge what you've done. The pristine Christmas setting had transformed into a battleground of raw emotions. My mother recovered first, her social training kicking in, as she attempted to regain control of the situation. Perhaps we should discuss this another time, Eleanor suggested, her voice strained but composed. It's Christmas after all. We shouldn't ruin the holiday with unpleasantness. Unpleasantness. Marcus echoed in disbelief. Mom, this goes beyond unpleasant. This is systematic financial betrayal of your own son. Howard stood suddenly, his imposing frame stiffening defensively. You don't understand the complexities of managing family wealth. Sometimes difficult decisions must be made for the greater good. And I wasn't part of that greater good, I asked, maintaining my calm despite the fury and hurt churning inside me. Explain to me, Dad, what greater good was served by denying me help with graduate school while buying Rebecca a luxury condo. You were always self-sufficient, Howard countered. You had scholarships, talent. So I was punished for my capabilities, I interrupted. While Rebecca was rewarded for dependency. Rebecca flinched at my words, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. I never asked for special treatment, she whispered. I know you didn't, I assured her before turning back to our parents. That's what makes this worse. You created this dynamic. You decided one child deserved more than the other. That's not how it was. Eleanor insisted, her perfectly manicured hand pressed against her chest. We love you all equally. We simply recognize different needs. Different needs. I withdrew another document from my pocket. Let me remind you of some needs you rejected. April 2016, I asked for a $15,000 loan to cover emergency dental surgery. You told me to budget better. That same month, you transferred $30,000 to Rebecca's account for a mental health retreat in the Maldives. My mother blanched recognition, flickering in her eyes. July 2019. I continued. I asked for help with the down payment on a condo, just $70,000. You lectured me about financial responsibility. 2 weeks later, you paid $200,000 to launch Rebecca's second failed gallery venture. Those were investments in her future, Howard argued, but his voice lacked conviction. And my future wasn't worth investing in, I challenged. Despite my proven track record of success in a stable, profitable profession, your sister needed more support, Eleanor began. Stop saying that, Rebecca suddenly shouted, startling everyone. Stop using me as your excuse. I never needed all those things. The luxury car, the fancy vacations. I certainly didn't need a house in Cambridge. She turned to me, her expression anguished. Charlie, I swear I didn't know they were taking from you to give to me. I believe you, I said quietly. Marcus, who had been methodically reviewing the financial documents, looked up with narrowed eyes. This goes back further than 12 years, he observed. There are references to earlier transactions. How long has this been happening? My father's shoulders slumped slightly. Since they were teenagers, he admitted reluctantly. 17 years I felt physically ill. You've been siphoning my inheritance for 17 years. We did what we thought was best. Eleanor insisted, though her usual confidence was cracking. Rebecca was struggling in school, needed tutors, special programs. I struggled too. I finally raised my voice. I worked 30 hours a week during college while maintaining a 4.0 GPA. I lived on ramen and caffeine pills to afford textbooks. You never complained, Howard said, as if this justified their actions. Because I was taught that self-sufficiency was a virtue, I shot back. I believed you when you said there wasn't enough money to help me. I believed I needed to stand on my own feet, while you were secretly draining my future to pad hers. Samantha, who had been watching with increasing discomfort, finally spoke up. How exactly did you think this would end? Did you think Charlton would never discover what you'd done? We planned to rebalance things eventually, Howard muttered, not meeting anyone's eyes. When I demanded. After buying her a third property, after funding a dozen failed business ventures, when exactly were you planning to rebalance my empty account? My father had no answer. The truth is, Marcus said slowly, they never intended for you to find out. They assumed your trust was something you'd never check on, something you'd only access far in the future. And by then we would have made arrangements, Eleanor added quickly. We have other assets, investments. That's not the point. I slammed my hand down on the coffee table, causing everyone to jump. It was the first time I'd lost my composure. The point is that you deliberately chose to favor one child over another, year after year, decision after decision. The money is just evidence of a much deeper betrayal. Rebecca approached me hesitantly. Charlie, I'll make this right. The house, the condo, I'll sell everything. I'll pay you back. I shook my head. This isn't your debt to repay, Becca. But I benefited from their actions, she insisted. I've been living off your money without knowing it. The responsibility lies with them, I said, pointing to our parents. They were the trustees. They made these decisions. Howard finally seemed to realize the gravity of the situation. What do you want, Charlton? Money. We can arrange transfers from our personal accounts. Now you offer financial help. I laughed bitterly. After years of telling me to stand on my own feet, after watching me struggle with student loans and a mortgage I can barely afford. We never meant to hurt you, Eleanor repeated her carefully, applied makeup now streaked with tears. But you did, I replied simply. And not just financially. Do you have any idea what it feels like to watch your sister receive constant praise and support while your achievements are barely acknowledged? Do you know what it's like to win a National Architecture Award and have your parents skip the ceremony for your sister's art, showing... My mother's face crumpled as the weight of accumulated slights and dismissals registered. I designed the Brunswick Tower. I continued, my voice rising with emotion. It's reshaping Boston's skyline. The mayor shook my hand. The project was featured in Architectural Digest, and your response was a text message saying, "Congratulations," with a period, not even an exclamation mark. We've been proud of you, Howard insisted weakly. You've never shown it, I countered. Not once in my adult life have you demonstrated genuine pride in my accomplishments. Marcus stood up, moving to place a hand on my shoulder. He's right. I've noticed it for years, but thought it was just typical family dynamics. I had no idea it extended to financial sabotage. That's a harsh characterization, Howard protested. What would you call secretly transferring over $2 million from one child's trust to another's? Marcus asked pointedly. My father had no answer. I want a full accounting, I said finally. Every dollar taken from my trust over the past 17 years with documentation. I want to understand exactly what happened and when. That would take weeks of work, Howard protested. Then you'd better get started, I replied coldly. And in the meantime, Eleanor asked, her voice small. In the meantime, I'll be consulting with a lawyer about potential violations of fiduciary duty, I answered. What you've done isn't just morally wrong, It's potentially illegal. The word illegal hung in the air like a thunderclap. Howard physically recoiled. You wouldn't take legal action against your own parents, Eleanor whispered aghast. Why not? I challenged. You had no problem stealing from your own son. Rebecca broke into fresh sobs, the reality of our family's dysfunction finally hitting her full force. Marcus guided her to sit down, his expression grim. I trusted you, I said, looking directly at my parents. Not just with my money, but with my achievements, my vulnerabilities, my place in this family. You betrayed that trust completely. The perfect Matthews family Christmas lay in ruins around us, the truth finally exposed after years of carefully maintained illusions. The hours following my revelation unfolded like scenes from a play I'd never wanted a role in. Howard retreated to his study, allegedly, to begin gathering the financial records I'd demanded, but more likely to escape the emotional fallout. Eleanor busied herself in the kitchen with Maria, the rhythmic chopping of vegetables for a dinner no one would feel like eating, providing a soundtrack to our fractured Christmas. Marcus took charge of his daughters when they ventured downstairs, attempting to preserve some semblance of holiday normalcy for them. Let's take your new toys to the park, he suggested, earning grateful looks from everyone as he bundled the confused children out the door. Samantha hesitated before following her family. Charlton, she said quietly, what you did took incredible courage. For what it's worth, I've always seen your value, even when they didn't. Her unexpected support nearly cracked my carefully maintained composure. Left alone in the living room, Rebecca and I sat in uncomfortable silence, the abandoned Christmas gifts surrounding us, like artifacts from a different timeline, one where our family hadn't just imploded. I feel sick, Rebecca finally whispered, staring at the house key still lying on the coffee table. All these years, everything they gave me. It was yours. Not everything, I corrected her. Just an unfair portion. The condo, the car, the galleries that failed. She looked up, her eyes red and swollen. Charlie, I would never have accepted any of it if I'd known. I believe you, I said again, because it was true. Rebecca had been as manipulated as I had been, just in a different way. I'll make it right, she insisted, reaching for my hand. I'll sell everything. The condo alone should cover a significant portion. Becca, stop, I interrupted gently. This isn't about getting the money back from you. This is about our parents acknowledging what they did. But I benefited from their actions, she persisted. I've been living off your future. You're their victim too, I said, surprising myself with the realization as I spoke it. They turned you into a dependent when you could have been self-sufficient. They undermined your growth while stealing my security. Rebecca considered this recognition dawning in her expression. They never encouraged me to stand on my own. Every time I struggled, they jumped in with money instead of letting me figure things out. Exactly, I nodded. They did us both a disservice, just in opposite ways. A soft knock at the doorframe interrupted us. Howard stood there, looking suddenly older than his 62 years. Rebecca, could I speak with your brother alone? She hesitated, looking to me for guidance. It's okay, I assured her. Once she had left, I turned to face our father. Have you gathered the records already? Not yet, he admitted, lowering himself into a chair across from me. Charlton, I need you to understand something. The decisions we made, they weren't about loving Rebecca more. Then what were they about? I challenged. Howard stared at his hands for a long moment. Your mother has always had difficulties with anxiety. End of 6. Howard stared at his hands. After Rebecca was born, she developed an unhealthy attachment, became convinced that something terrible would happen if Rebecca wasn't protected at all costs. So, you sacrificed my future to manage Mom's anxiety, I asked incredulously. It wasn't that simple, he insisted. You were always so capable, so independent. Rebecca struggled with everything, school, friends, decisions. Your mother became fixated on ensuring Rebecca's security. And you enabled this instead of getting her professional help. I couldn't keep the judgment from my voice. I tried, Howard said quietly, surprising me. Twice I convinced her to see someone. Both times she stopped after a few sessions, insisting she was fine. It was easier to give in, to let her direct more resources to Rebecca. Easier for whom, I asked. Not for me. Not for Rebecca either, if we're being honest. Howard had no response to this. Did you ever consider the impact on me? I pressed. Did you ever think about how it felt to be constantly overlooked, to achieve remarkable things, and receive nothing but indifference in return? I was proud of you, he said, his voice barely audible. I've always been proud of you. You had a strange way of showing it. I'm not good with emotions, he admitted. I thought you knew. How could I know what you never expressed? I asked. How was I supposed to feel valued when every tangible measure suggested otherwise? Before he could answer, my phone buzzed with an incoming call. Jessica's name flashed on the screen. I need to take this, I said, standing to leave the room. My girlfriend is wondering why I'm not at her parents' house for Christmas dinner as planned. Howard nodded, defeat evident in his posture. As I walked away, I heard him say quietly, I'm sorry, son, more than you can possibly know. The conversation with Jessica was brief, but emotional. It's all falling apart. I told her, my voice finally breaking. I need to get out of here. I'm coming to get you, she said immediately. Don't argue. I'll be there in 20 minutes. When I returned to the living room, the dynamics had shifted again. Eleanor had emerged from the kitchen, her perfect hostess demeanor cracked beyond repair. Rebecca sat beside her, both women red-eyed and subdued. Marcus had returned without his family, having dropped them at Samantha's parents' house. I'm leaving, I announced. Jessica is on her way. You can't leave, Eleanor protested. It's Christmas dinner. We need to talk this through as a family. We've had 17 years to talk it through, I replied. You chose secrecy and manipulation instead. That's not fair, she began. But Howard interrupted her. Eleanor, stop. He's right. My father's admission silenced the room. We've failed him. We've failed both of them in different ways. I began gathering my things, unable to remain in the suffocating atmosphere any longer. Rebecca followed me to the foyer. What happens now? She asked, her voice small and uncertain. I don't know, I answered honestly. I need time to process all this, to decide what actions to take. Will you cut us off? Her eyes filled with fresh tears. I couldn't blame you if you did, but, Charlie, you're my brother. I can't lose you. I sighed heavily. I'm not cutting you off, Becca. This isn't your fault. But things can't go back to how they were. Too much has been revealed. The doorbell rang, announcing Jessica's arrival. Opening the door, I felt a rush of relief at the sight of her concerned face, her arms immediately opening to embrace me. Let's go, she whispered, assessing the tension radiating from the house. As we walked to her car, snow beginning to fall again, I heard Rebecca call after me. Charlie, wait. She ran down the steps, still in her house slippers. I love you. That's real. That's always been real. I know, I said, giving her a brief hug. I love you too. That's why this hurts so much. The drive back to my apartment passed in a blur, Jessica's hand steady on mine, as I finally allowed the emotions to surface. Years of feeling less than, of questioning my worth, despite external success, of wondering why my achievements never seemed good enough. It all poured out in a torrent I couldn't control. You did the right thing, Jessica assured me, her psychologist training evident in her measured tone. This was never going to heal until it was exposed. I've blown up my entire family on Christmas Day, I said, the reality of it settling over me. No, she corrected firmly. Your parents did that years ago when they decided one child deserved more than another. You just finally called attention to the explosion that already happened. My phone buzzed incessantly, texts from Rebecca, voicemails from my mother, a single message from Marcus offering support. My father's silence spoke volumes. When we reached my apartment, Jessica insisted on staying. You shouldn't be alone tonight, she said, and I didn't have the strength to argue. As we sat on my worn sofa, takeout containers of Chinese food on the coffee table, the only restaurants open on Christmas, the contrast between this holiday and the elaborate Matthews Christmas traditions couldn't have been starker. Yet, somehow this felt more authentic than any family gathering I'd attended in years. What will you do? Jessica asked softly, tucking herself against my side. I don't know yet, I admitted. Part of me wants to pursue legal action, make them face consequences. Another part just wants to walk away completely. You don't have to decide tonight, she reminded me. Give yourself time to process. As we sat in the quiet of my modest apartment, snow falling outside the window, I realized that despite the pain, I felt something unexpected relief. The truth, however, devastating, had finally been acknowledged. The invisible burden I'd carried for years, wondering why I was never quite good enough for my parents' approval, had been exposed for what it was. Not my deficiency, but their betrayal. The family facade had cracked beyond repair, but perhaps something more authentic could eventually emerge from the wreckage. January arrived with a bitter cold that matched the chill between members of the Matthews family. After consulting with 3 different attorneys specializing in trust law, I settled on Catherine Jensen, a no-nonsense woman with 30 years of experience in fiduciary litigation. Her assessment was unambiguous. "What your parents did constitutes a clear breach of fiduciary duty," she explained during our second meeting, her office overlooking Boston Harbor. "As trustees, they were legally obligated to manage your trust for your benefit, not divert assets to another beneficiary, even if that beneficiary is your sibling." "What are my options?" I asked, still uncertain about how far I wanted to pursue this. "We could file a civil suit," she replied. "Demand recovery of misappropriated funds with interest. Given the documentation you've provided, they'd likely settle rather than face a public trial." The mention of public gave me pause. Despite everything, I wasn't sure I wanted my family's dysfunction exposed to the world. My career in architecture depended partly on connections and reputation. "Is there another approach?" I asked. Catherine nodded. "We could pursue mediation. Less adversarial, confidential, but still with legal teeth. I'd represent your interests, they'd have representation, and we'd negotiate a settlement." This path seemed more reasonable, allowing for accountability without complete destruction of family ties. After careful consideration, I authorized Catherine to send a formal letter to my parents requesting mediation and a full accounting of the trust. The response was swift and unexpected. Rather than the defensive posturing I'd anticipated, Howard agreed immediately to mediation and promised full financial transparency. Eleanor's signature was noticeably absent from his response. Meanwhile, my personal life continued its upheaval. News travels fast in professional circles, and though I'd shared minimal details, rumors about a Matthews family financial dispute began circulating. 2 clients requested meetings to ensure their projects wouldn't be affected by my personal issues. I maintained professionalism, but the added stress wore on me. Jessica proved to be my anchor. "You're doing remarkably well," she observed one evening, as we reviewed financial documents my father had sent over. "Many people would be falling apart." "I don't have that luxury," I replied, studying a transaction record from 2013. "Besides, architecture taught me to analyze structural problems methodically. This is just another kind of structural failure." "That's a healthy perspective," she said, though her professional tone couldn't hide her concern. "But you're allowed to feel the emotional impact too." "I'm saving that for therapy," I admitted. I'd finally started seeing a counselor, something I'd resisted for years, despite Jessica's gentle encouragement. Dr. Michael specialized in family trauma, and our weekly sessions had become essential to my coping strategy. Rebecca reached out consistently, her texts and emails filled with apologies and offers to make amends. After ignoring her for 2 weeks, I finally agreed to meet at a neutral coffee shop in Brookline. She arrived early, already nursing a cappuccino, her usual stylish appearance dimmed by obvious stress. "Charlie," she began immediately, "I'm selling the condo." "What?" This wasn't how I'd expected our conversation to start. "I've listed it. The realtor says in this market it should go for at least $1.2 million. I want you to have every penny." She pushed a folder across the table. "Here's the listing agreement, and my authorization for the proceeds to be transferred directly to you." I stared at the documents without touching them. "Becca, I told you this isn't about getting money from you." "I know, but I can't keep living in a place that was purchased with your money," she insisted. "I've found a small apartment to rent. I'm also selling the car and most of my art collection." "Where will you live long term?" I asked, genuinely concerned. Despite everything, I couldn't help worrying about her welfare. "I don't know yet," she admitted. "But for the first time in my life, I'm figuring things out on my own. I've applied for a full-time position at the Schneider Gallery. The pay isn't great, but it's stable." I felt an unexpected surge of pride. "That's really impressive, Becca." "I've been living in a bubble," she said, her voice cracking slightly. They didn't just hurt you, they stunted me, made me dependent. I never learned to stand on my own, because I never had to. Her self-awareness surprised me. You're seeing someone too, a therapist. She nodded. Twice weekly. It's been eye-opening and painful in equal measure. We talked for hours, truly communicating perhaps for the first time as adults. I learned that Rebecca had always sensed something was off in how our parents treated us, but had been conditioned to accept their explanation that I was the strong one who didn't need help. She shared painful revelations about our mother's controlling behavior, how Eleanor had subtly undermined Rebecca's independence for years. She convinced me I couldn't handle life on my own, Rebecca explained. Every time I faced a challenge, she'd swoop in with money, instead of encouraging me to find solutions. While simultaneously telling me that facing challenges alone builds character, I added wryly. By the time we parted, something had shifted between us. The siblings who'd been unwitting pawns in our parents' dysfunctional game were beginning to forge a more authentic relationship. Marcus proved to be an unexpected ally throughout this period. As the oldest, he'd escaped the worst of the dynamics by establishing his independence early, but he felt guilty for not recognizing the extent of the problem. I should have paid more attention, he said during a dinner at his Brookline home after his twins had gone to bed. I saw the favoritism, but assumed it was typical middle child syndrome, not systematic financial manipulation. You couldn't have known, I assured him. They kept it hidden for a reason. Still, I'm your brother. I should have looked out for you more. He poured me another scotch. For what it's worth, I've always been impressed by you. Building a career on pure talent rather than family connections, that takes genuine skill. His acknowledgement meant more than I could express. The mediation process moved forward methodically. Catherine proved to be worth every dollar of her substantial hourly rate, methodically dismantling Howard's attempts to minimize certain transactions or justify others. My father, to his credit, didn't deny any of the transfers once confronted with documentation. Eleanor was another story. She refused to attend the first 2 mediation sessions, sending her attorney with claims of health concerns. When she finally appeared at the 3rd session, her hostility was palpable. This is unnecessarily vindictive, she stated coldly, as we reviewed a particularly large transfer from 2017. We're your parents, Charlton. Everything we did was for this family. For parts of this family, I corrected. Not for me. You've always been selfish, she snapped, her composed facade cracking. Even as a child, you never considered how your actions affected others. Eleanor, Howard warned, looking alarmed at her outburst. No, Howard, I'm tired of walking on eggshells. He's threatening legal action against his own parents. What kind of son does that? The kind whose parents stole over $2 million from him, I replied evenly. The kind who was told to stand on his own feet while watching his sister receive everything on a silver platter. We gave you every advantage, she began. Except financial support, emotional validation, or basic parental recognition, I interrupted. Those you reserved exclusively for Rebecca. The mediator intervened before the exchange could escalate further, but the damage was done. Any hope of reconciliation with my mother seemed increasingly remote. Meanwhile, my career took an unexpected positive turn. The Brunswick Tower project received a prestigious international award, bringing renewed attention to my work. Architectural Digest requested an interview, and 3 major development companies approached me with project offers. I began considering striking out on my own, establishing an independent firm rather than remaining at my current company. Jessica supported this idea enthusiastically. You've always talked about having your own practice, she reminded me. Maybe this is the silver lining: freedom to pursue your vision without financial constraints. Assuming the mediation results in recovery of some assets, I cautioned. Even without that, she insisted. You've built a reputation on talent, not family connections. That's more valuable in the long run. After 4 months of negotiations, Catherine presented me with a settlement proposal. My parents would transfer assets equivalent to the diverted trust funds plus reasonable interest, approximately $3 million total. The transfers would occur in stages over 2 years to avoid tax complications. In exchange, I would sign a confidentiality agreement and release them from further claims. It's a solid offer, Catherine advised. Not perfect, but fair. The alternative is litigation, which could take years and damage everyone's reputation. After careful consideration and long discussions with Jessica, I accepted the terms. The first transfer $500,000 arrived in my account within a week. For the first time in my adult life, I had substantial financial security that I hadn't earned through relentless work. The feeling was disorienting. During a therapy session, I admitted to Dr. Michaels that I felt strangely guilty about accepting the money. "That's not surprising," he observed. "You've built your identity around being self-sufficient, the one who succeeds despite lack of support. This settlement challenges that narrative. It feels like taking handouts," I confessed, "the very thing I've prided myself on avoiding." "This isn't a handout," he corrected firmly. "It's recovery of what was always rightfully yours. The question now is, what will you do with this recovered freedom?" The answer came more easily than I expected. I would invest in myself, in the architecture firm I dreamed of founding, in the future I wanted to build with Jessica, in creating a life defined by my choices, rather than my parents' manipulations. 6 months after that fateful Christmas morning, Boston's summer heat shimmered off the sidewalks as I stood before the newly leased office space in the South End. The converted warehouse featured exposed brick walls, soaring ceilings with original wooden beams, and floor-to-ceiling windows that flooded the space with natural light, perfect for an architecture firm focused on innovative, sustainable design. Matthew's Design, Jessica read from the temporary sign in the window, squeezing my hand. "It looks good on you." "Just in time too," I replied, unlocking the door to show her the progress inside. "The Harborfront Development Project team wants preliminary sketches by next month." The settlement money had provided the capital I needed to establish my own firm, but it was my reputation that secured the first major clients. The Brunswick Tower had opened to critical acclaim, cementing my status in Boston's architectural community. 2 junior architects from my former firm had followed me, believing in my vision enough to take a chance on a startup. The legal settlement had concluded more smoothly than anticipated once my mother finally accepted the inevitable. The final agreement included a structured payment plan with the Cambridge Victorian house, which Rebecca had refused to occupy, being sold as part of the settlement. Howard had taken early retirement from his development company, citing health concerns that we all understood were a cover for the private family upheaval. Rebecca had transformed in ways I never expected. After selling the Back Bay condo and most of her luxury possessions, she'd secured a full-time position as assistant director at the Schneider Gallery. She rented a modest apartment in Jamaica Plain, and for the first time in her life paid all her own bills. "I feel like I'm finally growing up," she told me, during our now regular Sunday brunches. "It's terrifying and exhilarating at the same time." Our relationship had evolved into something healthier, still loving, but no longer distorted by our parents' manipulations. We were learning to be siblings on equal footing, supporting each other without the toxic dynamics that had defined our earlier interactions. Marcus had become a more present brother as well, making efforts to include me in family gatherings with his wife and daughters. His twins now proudly displayed the architectural models I designed, especially for them, telling everyone their uncle was the most famous building maker in Boston. The most complex evolution involved my parents. Howard had made genuine attempts at reconciliation, acknowledging his failures without excuses. During a difficult but necessary conversation in March, he'd admitted the full extent of his enabling behavior. "I knew what we were doing was wrong," he confessed during a private lunch at his club. I justified it by telling myself it was temporary, that we'd eventually make things right. But the years passed, and it became easier to maintain the status quo than face the truth. "Why did you let it happen?" I asked the question that had haunted me for months. Howard stared into his untouched scotch. "Your mother. She's always been fragile, in ways she hides well. After Rebecca was born, she developed intense anxiety about her future, became convinced that Rebecca needed extraordinary protection and support. When I tried to establish boundaries, Eleanor would have what the doctors now call panic attacks. So you sacrificed my interests to keep Mom stable," I summarized. "I thought I could balance both," he said, looking truly regretful. "I told myself you were stronger, that you'd succeed regardless. I was both right and terribly wrong. You did succeed, but at a cost no child should have to pay." Though I wasn't ready to fully forgive, I could at least understand the complex factors that had led to our family's dysfunction. Howard was seeing a therapist now too, trying to unravel decades of unhealthy patterns. Eleanor proved less capable of change. Though she'd eventually signed the settlement agreement, she maintained that they had only done what was necessary for family harmony. Our interactions remained strained and infrequent, limited mainly to group settings where others could buffer the tension. Some relationships can't be fully repaired, Dr. Michaels had advised during one of our sessions. Acknowledging that isn't failure, it's setting healthy boundaries. Jessica had been my constant support throughout this journey of family reconstruction. On a warm evening in July, as we walked along the Charles River after dinner, I surprised her by dropping to one knee. "This past year has taught me what truly matters," I said, opening the ring box I'd been carrying for weeks. "You saw my worth when my own family couldn't. You encouraged me to stand up for myself when I'd been conditioned to accept less. I can't imagine building my future with anyone else." Her joyful acceptance and the tears in her eyes provided all the validation I needed. We set the date for October, planning a ceremony that would reflect our values rather than social expectations. The personal growth I'd experienced extended beyond family dynamics and into my professional identity. The first design I completed under my own firm's name felt different, more authentically mine, unburdened by the need to prove my worth to parents who might never fully see it. With financial security came unexpected freedom, not just monetary, but psychological. I no longer felt compelled to work 80-hour weeks to prove my value. I could take on projects that inspired me rather than those that simply paid well. I could plan vacations with Jessica, invest in our future home live, without the constant anxiety that had shadowed me for years. On the anniversary of that revelatory Christmas, I hosted dinner at my newly purchased townhouse in South Boston, a property I'd selected not for prestige, but for its potential, its character, and the sun-filled spaces I envisioned filling with family someday. Jessica had moved in 2 months earlier, her books mingling with mine on shelves, her presence transforming the space into a true home. Marcus and Samantha came with the twins. Rebecca brought her new boyfriend, a kind-eyed art professor she'd met through the gallery. Howard arrived alone. Eleanor had declined the invitation, sending a generic card instead. As we gathered around the table I'd designed and built myself, I looked at these people who formed my reconfigured family. The past year had stripped away pretense and favoritism, replacing them with more authentic, if sometimes painful, connections. "I'd like to make a toast," I said, raising my glass. "To truth, however difficult, to growth, however painful, and to building new foundations on honest ground." The journey from that Christmas morning revelation to this moment had been the hardest of my life, but also the most transformative. I discovered that sometimes family isn't what you're born into, but what you choose to build. That self-worth comes not from parental approval, but from living authentically. That the greatest freedom comes from facing painful truths rather than maintaining comfortable illusions. As I looked around at the faces of those who truly valued me, I realized that what had initially felt like devastating loss had actually been liberation. The single piece of paper I'd handed my father that Christmas morning hadn't just exposed financial betrayal, it had freed all of us from roles that had stunted our growth and distorted our relationships. Sometimes, the greatest gifts come disguised as loss. Sometimes, the most important foundations are the ones we build ourselves after the inherited structures have crumbled. Have you ever experienced favoritism in your family? How did you handle it? Share your stories in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more real-life experiences. Remember, sometimes standing up for yourself is the greatest act of self-love, even when it's difficult. Thank you for listening, and may your holidays be filled with authentic connections and true appreciation.